Today, we're going to talk about all the different ways you can race your mountain bike.
Hi everyone, if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Sid.
And I'm Mackie, and today we are talking about all the different ways that you can race your mountain bike.
We wanted to make this video because we get a lot of questions along the lines of what's the difference between enduro and cross country? What sort of race should I do as my first mountain bike race? We want to do some more videos on this channel where we talk about ways to get into mountain bike racing. So we figured this would be a good start to just go through all the options. The first discipline we want to talk about, which is sort of the most basic way you can race your bike, is cross-country mountain bike racing.
The basic idea with cross-country is that it's a mass start, meaning everybody starts together, and the first person to cross the finish line wins. This can be one big loop, it can be multiple small loops, it can even be point to point, although it is usually a loop.
If you go race your local or regional cross-country race, you'll probably encounter a race that is, if you're racing in an advanced category, 20 to 30 miles. If you're doing a beginner category, 10 to 15 miles.
When you get into the longer distances of cross-country races, 35, 40, 50 mile range, those are generally considered marathon cross-country races. Same idea, same format, just longer races.
There are a lot of awesome marathon races in the US, so this might be something that you encounter. And if you want to do a marathon race and you haven't done much mountain bike racing, just be prepared for a long day on the bike.
When you get past the 50-ish mile mark, those events generally become considered ultra endurance races. 100 milers fall into that, sometimes 100K ones, which are 60 miles. Personally, we would not recommend that as your first ever mountain bike race because they are really long.
Another option for spending a long period of time on your bike is 24-hour or 12-hour racing, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. There usually is a set course that you repeat for 12 hours or 24 hours.
These can be really fun if you do them as a team, because then while one person's racing, the other people are hanging out and recovering. It can be a nice way to sort of ease into that. There are some crazy people who do 24-hour races on their own, but we are not those crazy people.
Not yet, anyway. And if you see a race that is called an XC stage race, that is a multi-day cross-country race, which means you race what is more or less a standard XC race every day for multiple days in a row. And that's what we were doing in Moab just a few weeks ago.
There are a couple of special formats of cross-country racing that have very specific course lengths and stuff that we thought we'd mention. The first is XCO, or cross-country Olympic style. This is the kind of racing that you see on Red Bull TV at the World Cups and that you see at the Olympics. The difference is that the loop is really short. You may do 5 loops, you may do 8 loops. What makes these fun is that the spectators get to see the racing happening.
And XCO races are often a little more technically challenging than your average XC race in that there are some man-made features. There might be jumps, drops, maybe some tricky rock gardens. Another super fun cross-country discipline that you don't see all the time is short track cross-country. And short track is basically a short track.
Less than 5 minutes to do a lap. So people are going around really, really fast and it's really fun to watch.
It's a short loop that you do for a set amount of time. So usually you will see on a short track that it's 30 plus 2. This means 30 minutes of going on this loop, and then when that 30-minute hits, they add 2 laps. That way you know exactly when you're gonna be done.
But it's not a predetermined number of laps. It's based on how long it takes to do the laps.
Exactly. This was Mackie's best discipline when he was racing cross country, even won a national championship.
Next up is cross-country eliminator. And just like the name says, the way this discipline works is that people get eliminated. So 4 people at a time will race through a man-made track that's got some interesting features. They might be logs, they might be jumps. Sometimes it's on dirt, sometimes it's in a city on pavement. The last 1 or 2 people to cross the finish line get eliminated. The first people move on to the next round.
Moving on from cross-country racing, let's talk about downhill.
Downhill is exactly what you would think it is. You race down the hill.
A typical downhill, or you might hear it called DH track, is going to be 3 to 5 minutes long. They're often at a bike park, so you will take a chairlift up and then race down. If it isn't a bike park, there usually will be a shuttle because everyone will be on downhill bikes, which do not go uphill. The way a typical downhill racing weekend works is that you will be able to walk the track, then you will get to practice it at a set time, and this is all the same trail, and then you will do a qualification run, and they'll take your time from the qualification to decide when you'll start for the finals. And then you'll do your finals run, which will determine who wins. So whoever gets down the mountain the fastest in the finals is the winner.
You guys have probably seen this if you watch any of the Red Bull World Cup downhill coverage. Your local or regional race probably isn't going to have the same features. You're probably not going to have the massive gaps and huge drops that they do, but you will probably have some drops and jumps. Downhill is definitely a more technical discipline than cross country, at least in terms of the descending. A discipline that was sort of related to downhill was Super D, or super downhill. It was really an interesting discipline in that it was a mass start where downhill is individual starts. Super D was a mass start and everybody usually ran to their bikes, picked up their bike, jumped on them, and then started down the trail.
And that kind of start where you run and grab your bike is generally called a Le Mans start. So if you see Le Mans, you should know that that's what you're getting yourself into.
Super D was really fun. It was just, lots of people like jostling for position on the trail all at the same time, and first person to the bottom was the winner. Well, there's still one race that we know of that sort of uses this format. It's called the Mega Avalanche. It's in France. By and large, Super D is extinct.
Another downhill discipline that does still exist is dual slalom.
The idea behind dual slalom is that you are riding a preset course with berms and jumps, and there are 2 tracks, and 2 people at a time race down this track. The last person to make it down gets eliminated. The first person moves on. So it's 2 people at a time racing, bracketed down to the last 2 people, and then the person who finishes first is the winner.
A precursor to dual slalom was 4Cross, which was a pretty cool event. It was similar to Cross Country Eliminator, only it was downhill, and there were usually pretty big jumps, berms, doubles, lots of cool stuff, and it was 4 people racing at a time, so there were some pretty spectacular crashes in 4Cross.
You also didn't have to stay on your track. Yeah. With dual slalom, it was like you were on your track. With 4Cross, it was like, here's the course, you all start next to each other, and then you could all go wherever you wanted. So it was chaos.
Sadly, for those of us who like to spectate events with epic crashes, 4Cross is now, by and large, extinct. It is now time to talk about Enduro.
It's time. For those of you who have been following the channel, you know Sid and I have been focused primarily on racing Enduro for the last 5 years. Enduro is kind of an interesting mixture of cross country and downhill. It's like cross country in that you have to pedal to the top of the hill. It's like downhill in that you are only timed on the downhill. So you're pedaling up to the top, it's not timed, then you're racing down the hill, and you're going to do this multiple times on different courses throughout the day.
And these courses are almost always more technical than a typical cross-country descent. In fact, we often race downhill courses, only we do several of them over the course of a day.
And you have to pedal to the top of them, so it's really hard.
One of the things that I think is super confusing about Enduro is that there is a huge variety of what Enduro races are like, especially in the US. Some races are at bike parks and you don't pedal up the hills at all. You just take a chairlift for every single race stage. Some are huge loops where you might pedal 3,500 feet over the course of the day and be out for 6 to 7 hours. An Enduro race can be a great first race, but you want to do a little research and see what you're getting into. You can talk to people who have done it or find elevation profiles online, because there's a huge amount of variance between Enduro races. And if you want an example of all of these disciplines in action, check out this video of MACKY racing Enduro, cross country, downhill, and dual slalom at the same event, all on the same bike.
If you know of a race that doesn't fit into one of these categories, please let us know. We would love to hear about it because we love new ways to race our bikes.
And in the meantime, don't forget to be more awesome.